So this is our final session of this morning, our headline act, if you will. And I'm really pleased to be talking today to Matt Bushby, who is the CMO of Rightmove. So Rightmove, you may know as the weeknight doom scroll where you sort everything, wine drunk, most expensive first, and see what you can't afford. It is also the platform described by Richard Osman as his Tinder, which is very important. But it's much, much more than that. So I'm coming to you from Automated Creative today, a creative effectiveness platform. And what we're going to do is take a bit more of a critical look on the uses of AI to make sure that we are actually using it to service true business cases, improve our marketing, and importantly, deliver value, because that's what we're all here to do. So a big, big round of applause for Matt, and we will start our conversation.
Thank you very much. I probably should start by saying I'm not an AI expert, so please don't leave the room now on hearing that. Hopefully it's just helpful to hear from, I think, from my perspective as a marketer, having worked at Rightmove, having worked at Just Eat and various other places, how we're seeing AI as an enabler for our creativity as a business, but also as we're thinking about it, we're a FTSE 100 business, we're trying to think about it with our board, actually how are we framing all of that together? So that perspective is hopefully what we can bring and talk about. And maybe it's worth just 20 seconds on what on earth Rightmove is, because I think it's hopefully an app on your phone that you use more than you sort of give yourself credit for. And it's something that people are using to find their homes, something people are using to spy on their neighbours' kitchens, something that people are using to look at £30 million mansions that they may or may not end up living in. But it's a business that in a lot of ways is big, 2.5 billion visits every year, a huge amount of data, a huge amount of audience, and something that is important, and it will become a little bit more clear as to why it's important, is that we're a business with a very high margin, a 70% EBITDA margin, and that means that AI is a really important part of our thinking because we're thinking about how we can get more done and how we can deliver, I think, for all of the things we need to do for our consumers, for our partners and our people as well.
Absolutely. And I think when we think about Rightmove as a brand and a business, you are ultimately a disruptor in a very, very traditional space. So technology has been part of your DNA from day one. So what types of approaches do you as a business take to bringing in technology? So even before that kind of AI question, like how are you approaching that as a team?
Yeah, well, I think we are inherently a technology company, and that is, we have been a disruptor, but there are lots and lots of examples of disruptors being disrupted. So for us, it's really important that we have not just an eye on actually how we trade our business, but how we innovate and how we think about, I think, the way in which technology can enable our teams. What are the use cases that are going to help us to be more successful as a business? This is never technology for technology's sake. It's always got to be technology that solves a problem. So we're thinking we work collaboratively with our product teams, with our finance teams, or sometimes with our legal teams as well, in different groups and different squads to work out actually how we leverage technology to support the different things that we want to do as a business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why some of this perspective from a non-expert who is obviously deploying it very seriously is really important, because we need to think about this in a much broader context of what is servicing the business and not just adopting things because they are the shiny object, as my colleague Tom would say.
And we were talking about this before. I think if you look at our shareholder community, if you look at the investors in our business, there is, for some of them, a sense that AI is going to be a multiplier. It's going to all of a sudden mean that we drive 2 times our revenue. It means that we're going to become even more profitable. And I don't think, certainly at the moment, it isn't that big silver bullet. It's something that's going to enable us to deliver in a number of smaller areas.
Okay, so you've touched on it's being deployed in smaller areas at the moment. So why is AI important for Rightmove right now?
Well, at a macro level, I think we see it as a fundamentally enabling technology. We see it as something that's going to help us to do more stuff. So we think about it through the prism of really 3 groups: through our consumers, our partners, who are primarily estate agents, and our people, so the people that work at Rightmove. And we're thinking about actually how do we create utility? How does AI create utility for those people? So a couple of examples from a consumer point of view, we're starting to look at natural language search and how that creates filters, and how you think about, maybe at the moment you tick a load of boxes, it shows you the results you want. actually, if you're looking for something quite specific, so a 2-bed flat overlooking a park with the good dog walks and half an hour into London, then you can't really do that with a filter. You can do that with natural language search. So we're starting to test ways in which we do that. Another, I think, quite lovely way of using it is that we've got, you've possibly, some of you will have bought a doer-upper, a bit of a wreck of a house. So what we're looking at and what we're working on are ways in which we can enable the pictures of that house to really be brought up using AI in a way that helps you to understand what it might look in a minimalist style, in a country house style,
Very cool.
For those of us that sometimes lack imagination, according to my wife, when I walk into a house, this is a moment where actually we can use the technology to enable that. And for our partners, it's about how do we help them to run their businesses? So how do we help them to cut through all the admin and get things done? And for our people, I think the really big thing that we've focused on is how do we help them to focus on the stuff they're really bloody good at? So being creative, thinking about actually how do they solve problems rather than spending hours a day going through big data sheets or building PowerPoint presentations. How can we use the technology to enable greater space to be creative and solve problems?
Yeah, amazing. So we've got the standard use cases there, which are typically that kind of faster and cheaper, probably a lot of the time. But I think what you're touching on here is really important in terms of we need AI to service us to make us better. And how can we improve those experience, not just the functional kind of parts of making searches, but that inspirational point as well is super, super interesting. So how are you as kind of marketing teams kind of digging into that in a little bit more detail?
Well, I think we've tried to work out, well, where have we got a problem and where do we think AI can help us to solve for that problem? So we have a picture of 2 lovely looking individuals behind us, one of whom is our CEO, one of whom is our head of trade marketing. And they are kind of indicative of a problem we've been trying to solve for. So we do a lot of agent education. What does that mean? That broadly means that we're a qualified school, we help to train people's teams, we help to provide them with all of the various different tools that they need to run their businesses. But one of the things we realise is people have different learning styles, and lots of people are finding that what we provide, which can be slightly dense text-based learning, is a challenge. So a lot of the feedback we got from our partners was, well, we'd love video content. It just happens there's an awful lot of content and an awful lot of videos that we needed to create. So we've been playing around with AI avatars. So these 2 are real people, but they're not real people. They are the avatars of real people. And we've been using them and testing them with our agents to say, actually, they're going to deliver parts of the modules of content, 1 minute, 2 minute, short videos that help us to break it up and to work with different learning styles. The big thing that we're trying to do, though, is to make sure that this feels authentic and this is something that people actually want. So we're not just rolling out and saying we've solved a problem. We're trying it in different groups. We're testing it because I think there is a line definitely at the moment, and we're seeing that where you can overstep. And if effectively the feeling is that you're using AI to take away a human interaction, well, people don't love that, and we've seen that there's a challenge there. But actually, if it's supplementary, if it's adding to the experience and it's feeling as though they're getting something that they wouldn't have got otherwise, then it seems to be working well. So these 2 may very well play a bigger part in what we do with our agent training, but we're just trying to work out where that's going to work and how that's going to work as well.
So is there an agent, Matt Bushby, yet? Should I be talking to him in future, not you?
He arguably a bit more interesting, but not yet. We will. That treat may be yet to come.
Okay, so experimenting, trialing, and I think really crucially here, trialing with an audience that, again, are probably AI skeptics versus AI sort of adopters.
Absolutely.
But I think using it there for that use case of how am I taking a maybe 1-2-dimensional experience and bringing in video to make it more interesting. So it's definitely a value add versus taking away something that's already existing. So I think that's a really important point there. How else have you been applying it today?
So we've been thinking about it from a consumer point of view. And again, it sounds like a broken record here, but we come back to utility. How do we add value to lives of our consumers? And I think we've been looking at that. We've been playing around with how we use AI around our social content. We've had some successes. We've had some had some failures as well, things that haven't worked quite so well. But we've tried to think, well, how can it be additive? How can it not just be us using AI because, well, everybody thinks you should use AI. So one of the things we did, I'll flick if I know how to work the flicker. If you think about how probably most people use Rightmove, and this is probably not our corporate line, but people are looking for their dream home. People are looking for that sort of 1 in a million thing. What am I aspiring to? And so we thought, well, how do we use AI to help to bring that to life, but bring it to life in a way that's going to be a bit more fun? How are you going to actually try to create experiences that people enjoy? And I think one of the big things that we're trying to look at strategically is how, for younger consumers in what is frankly a difficult property market, we create engagement, but then we use that as a hook to help them in their moving journey. So this is part of our entertainment pillar of content, but we've also got a lot around actually how do we help you understand how to get your first mortgage, how to get on, how to rent a flat, all those sorts of things. So this felt like it played a role. So we thought, actually, how do we use AI to enable that? So effectively what we wanted to hear from our users and our consumers was, well, what are the things? Who are you? What makes you you? What are the sort of the component parts that helps you to think about what your dream home would look like? And then with some sort of slight exaggeration we then created those moments that I think were always something that helped us to add a bit of joy to the brand and to bring that through. So they created a range of different things. You may see a gnome with a small red hat in the top corner, who may look familiar. But what we tried to do was to use this to really reflect consumer behavior. Consumers were trying to look for their dream homes. That was a lot of the reason they were using Rightmove. But actually, this was an opportunity for us to inject something into the platform that was going to help them to enjoy that, create shareable content, and to sort of, I think, do something that was going to help us to connect with a group of consumers who perhaps had used Rightmove in a slightly more functional way. So there are, I can't remember the last count quite how many there were, but there are hundreds of thousands of different versions, because this is not a templated sort of drop-in. This is unique AI versions created every single time. So every single one was different. A little bit of work with the legal team, as you can imagine, to make sure that we were careful in the way in which we executed it. But it created a really great moment for us. It created a lot of shareable content online. It created quite a lot of conversation around what we were doing. And then it helped us to hook consumers into the conversation around, well, how do I do this for real? How do I start my journey to my dream home?
Amazing. So it's really not just giving you the scale, so you wouldn't have been able to achieve hundreds of thousands of assets manually in any way, shape or form. So there's one area here where you're able to do things that you've never been able to do before. But also it's this kind of inspiration point, and we're getting more creative responses and giving a bit more personality into, as you say, what can be quite a functional moment in time for people searching. So how else are you using AI to enable creativity within the team as well? Because obviously you're a marketing leader, you're running a team of people. How are you using that to kind of inspire them as well?
It's been a really big challenge and opportunity for us. And I'll start with the boring bit, and because I think the boring bit's what enables the more interesting bit, because the boring bit is actually how do you set the guardrails? How do you make sure that you're bringing on board the right proprietary tools, you're bringing on board the right frameworks and the right usage behaviors? So what we're not doing is sticking all of our proprietary data on ChatGPT. We're thinking about ways in which we can create closed LLMs and thinking about ways in which we're able to actually create environments where people can genuinely be creative. They can test, they can learn, they can fail, they can succeed. So those guardrails were something we spent a long time working on at a corporate level with our legal team. We took external advice, and they're constantly changing because everything changes, and it changes bloody quickly. So what we did as a consequence of having set that down, though, was then to think about, well, how do we set bigger challenges for our people and for our agencies as well? So with our creative agency Neverland, media agency Wavemaker, with Uncovered, our social agency, how do we think about, well, what are the problems that we're setting ourselves? How do we maybe shoot for something big, and actually in what we learn on the way there, we're going to hopefully give ourselves a platform that means that we can sort of constantly iterate, because we're not a big business. We're a marketing team of about 40. So we need all of the collective experience that we can bring in. We've created AI champions in our teams. So we've got 6 teams within the marketing team. We've given everybody the tools, given people access to Copilot. We've given them access to Google through our corporate relationship. And we've said to them, really get in, use the tools, but go in there with a use case, go in there with something that you are trying to solve, a business problem that you've got, or, well, actually, to be honest, start off with get to know the tools, get to know what's possible, but then think about, actually, well, how's this sort of solve a problem for me? And I think what we've been able to do as a consequence of that, and the reason we created the AI Champions, is actually we need to filter it through something. So what we want to do is to bring that together, start to create a sandbox where we try, we succeed, we fail, but we do it quickly. And then we start, this was an example of one of those that we did with Neverland, which starts as an idea that someone has in the side of their head, and then all of a sudden becomes something that we say, well, okay, that could work, and we scale that up and we do that. And we've got more examples of that, hopefully, that are coming up where we're trying to use it in different areas, and that's everything from our research team, where we're thinking about ways in which we can sort of get a clearer sense as to how we scale up some of our research projects, all the way through to, I guess, how we're able to build products for our partners and our agents, and how we're able to create almost, I think, bespoke AI assistants. You can obviously plug straight into an existing AI assistant, but actually, how do you build one that is specific for that industry and is going to help them where they don't want to let their proprietary data out of the platform as well? So we're working on those sorts of things too.
Music to my ears as a strategist, because it sounds like the classic thing of let's spend a lot of time working out what the question is that we're answering, what the problem is we're trying to solve, and then from there the different solutions can fall out of it. Because if you start with here's the thing that I just think is kind of cool, sometimes that's not the best way to actually do that in a commercial context, because that's, again, we're trying to deliver value, we're trying to make things improve. So finally, I think talking a little bit to that value piece, where are you at the moment in terms of firstly, the reception. So how have the teams responded to this? How have your consumers been responding to this? But also, how are you showing that value back to the business? Are you doing that at the moment? Or are you still in that kind of experimental phase? And how are we having conversations around ROI to your commerce team? How are you justifying hundreds of thousands of this kind of thing at the moment?
Yeah. So it's a really good question. How are our consumers and our partners responding to this? The reality is, we don't entirely know yet. We're looking and trying to understand what the impact is and where are they going to see. And I come back to the idea of creating value. If this is a technology that creates value and we can show the value, in the main, they don't care it's AI. In fact, sometimes when you badge it AI, they react worse to it than when you don't. So we've got our own in-house called The Living Room, so our testing platform where we've got about 20,000 consumers who we test concepts with. We test those externally as well, and we're trying to test the edges of that and understand, well, actually, how does this add value to you? Where are you actually feeling as though AI can play a part in your life? Where actually do you proactively push against that? And we learn that by making some mistakes as well. We just don't want to make those mistakes really big mistakes. So I think that's part of how we're understanding that, and I think that's going to change. Look, you will have had people who are much bigger experts than me on this stage talking about how quickly this technology is evolving. So I think what's true today probably won't be true in 3 months' time. I think we were talking about 18-month horizons. I think we're talking about 3-6-month horizons in a lot of cases, and sometimes shorter than that as well. So I think that's going to change, and I think how consumers engage is going to change, and how receptive they are is inevitably going to change as well. To your second question, which is sort of how do we prove return on investment, I think what we've done as a business is to invest money where we're not expecting a return on investment. So I guess an investment fund, for want of a better phrase, to make sure that actually we can learn in an environment where you've not got to prove immediate return. Because I think that if you do that, that very much changes the way in which you think about the problem. So we've put money in to allow people to use the technology. We've invested in sort of long-term technology relationships. We've invested in giving people enough space in their day to use some of that technology. And we've also said, let's try some things and let's put them into market, let's test them, but let's also put some stuff live and see what works and see what doesn't. But as with any FTSE 100 business, if you're going to scale that, you need to build business cases. And so if we go back to the first example, our avatars, I think what we've said is, well, we need to do this. We know that we need to drive engagement. We know this would have cost us X amount of money if we were to have built this content in the traditional way. We know that actually it costs us X.
There's a benchmarking
as a consequence of that.
Yeah.
So we're basically benchmarking and building ROI for the big projects where we really want to scale it up.
Yeah.
And we've got a very supportive board. We've got a very supportive CEO. The board sometimes have big dreams for what it can do, and I think we're sometimes bringing them in and saying, actually, these are the ways in which we can apply the technology.
Amazing.
But the environment is a really good one for being able to do that.
So a really helpful, pragmatic look about how to adopt this type of technology, and just put our big grown-up marketing pants on and make sure we're doing it all properly. So it's been fantastic to hear from Matt. We are at time. I know there's a couple of questions that came through, but I'm sure he'll be happy to chat to you at the front if you've got some time afterwards. But big round of applause for Matt, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.